We're taught that countries collapse because they mismanage money. That debt is punishment for bad decisions. That survival in the global economy is earned. But here's the uncomfortable mystery. Why do some nations collapse under debt, while others drowning in even more are quietly saved? Why does default mean devastation for one country and a bailout for another? The answer isn't found in elections, productivity, or corruption indexes. It's written somewhere else. On a ledger most people never see and were never meant to question. To find that ledger, we have to rewind to the moment the modern financial world was designed. In 1944, as World War II was still raging, global powers met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Their goal wasn't just reconstruction, it was control. They wanted to prevent another global collapse like the Great Depression. The solution was a new financial architecture. The US dollar as the center of global trade. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, to police currency stability. The World Bank to fund development on paper. This was cooperation. In practice, it created hierarchy. Some countries would issue money, others would borrow it. And that imbalance planted the seed of the hidden ledger. Under the Bretton Woods system, the US dollar was backed by gold. Other currencies were backed by dollars. This made the United States the financial anchor of the world. But in 1971, that anchor was removed. The US ended the gold standard. Money was no longer tied to anything physical. It became a promise. This changed everything. Banks could now create credit almost endlessly. Governments could finance spending through debt. And developing countries newly independent and desperate for growth were encouraged to borrow. Loans poured into Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia. Infrastructure expanded. Economies grew. But the ledger was forming quietly in the background, tracking who owed, who complied, and who mattered. In the 1970s, borrowing felt like progress. Interest rates were low. All money flooded global banks. Debt was framed as a path to modernization. Then the rules changed. In the early 1980s, the U.S. Federal Reserve raised interest rates sharply to fight inflation. Overnight, loan payments for developing countries exploded. Mexico defaulted in 1982. Others followed. The crisis caused by reckless spending alone. It was triggered by decisions made far outside these countries' control. This is where the ledger became visible. When countries could no longer pay, the IMF stepped in. But IMF loans weren't free. They came with conditions. Cut public spending, privatize national assets, reduce wages and labor protections, open markets to foreign investors. These policies were called structural adjustment. The promise was recovery. The result was dependency. Countries that accepted the terms stayed connected to global finance. Countries that resisted were cut off. Survival was no longer about economic health. It was about obedience to the system. Here's the pattern that keeps repeating. When major banks fail, they are rescued. When systemically important countries collapse, they are stabilized. When smaller or less connected nations fail, they are blamed. Greece received massive bailouts after 2010, but most of that money went to European banks, not Greek citizens. Argentina, on the other hand, was locked out of capital markets for years. The difference wasn't debt levels, it was who the collapse threatened. The ledger doesn't protect countries, it protects the system. Over time, reform efforts came and went. Debt forgiveness initiatives, development programs, anti-poverty campaigns. Yet global debt only grew. Today, total global debt exceeds $300 trillion, while economic growth struggles to keep up. That's because the system doesn't require repayment. It requires perpetual rollover. Debt becomes a tool of leverage. It's not a problem to solve. Every solution preserves the ledger instead of erasing it. Look around now. Emerging markets face rising interest rates and collapsing currencies. Meanwhile, wealthy nations run record deficits with little consequence. The same rules don't apply. Climate finance offers loans, not grants, to countries already drowning in debt. Financial crises are framed as local failures, even when global forces cause them. The ledger still decides. Who gets time, who gets punished, who gets erased, and it does so quietly. First, global debt is not accidentally structural. Someone must always owe. Second, survival in the financial system depends on alignment, not responsibility. compliance matters more than numbers. Third, crises are moments of enforcement, not breakdown. They remind countries where they stand on the ledger. The most dangerous part of this system isn't debt itself. It's invisibility. As long as people believe countries fail on their own, the ledger remains unchallenged. So the next time a nation collapses, ask a different question. Who decided it wouldn't be saved? If this changed how you see global finance, subscribe for more deep dives into money, power, and hidden economic systems. Because once you see the ledger, you start seeing everything differently.